Well, I hope you all get something out of this. I'm going to treat all of you like you know almost nothing about wood turning. It's been my experience that no matter how much I think I know, when I watch somebody else do something, I always pick up something out of it. An example is about 2 weeks ago, I watched Lyle Jamison. Anybody know Lyle Jamison? Real good guy from Michigan. My wife's from there, so she thinks he's a real good guy. I was watching his demo, and I'd seen it like 3 or 4 other times, and I actually saw it down at the Tucson Club one time. And I thought, oh man, this is the same thing I saw, but I picked up 3 items that I hadn't kept copy for. So I'm going to start, and I'm just going to simply talk about hollowing. I have some problems, many, some of them are between years, but my main problem that I have in turning is I've got some wrist issues, and I've had surgery on this one, and the cranking and so forth on tools all day long could get to me. And like somebody else in the club here, now I've got some back issues, so I don't bend over real good. Many of you that have done bowls, particularly deep bowls, where you have this big old tool and you're bending way over like this, and you're getting way back in here. Anybody feel like that?
Never.
And so forth. And then you decide to take a scraper because you don't have a negative edge scraper, and you're back in there, and the scraper does this like that, and you wind up having a sore jaw out of it. I didn't like doing that, and I did it twice. Okay, so. Anyway, I thought about different hollowing systems, and there's gobs of them out there. There's the oboe, there's Trent Bosch has one. There are dozens of them out there. I picked, and I copied one similar, inspired, as I say, from Lyle Jamison's, because I wanted to do stuff like this, that I could get inside and I could have a relatively smooth inside, consistent thickness, without killing myself while I was doing it and so forth. And having worked on a machine lathe a little bit, knowing that that piece of metal is cutting the other steel is solid instead of moving around like our hands do, I wanted to do that. So this was like the 3rd one that I did, 3rd piece after I made the system. That's a piece of mesquite that came off a tree I had down in Phoenix at one time. The little piece of maple on top was because I made the opening too thin at top, so I glued a piece of maple on it to hide it. And actually, excuse me, to accent the top. So to start out in hollowing, I do it a certain way, and many other people do it many different ways. Now they be all wrong. My way is the only way, right? As you experiment and get tools, and as you pick up these big things here and so forth, each of us watch many different videos, demonstrations, but we pick up our own little techniques. And as long as it works, it's the right technique. I learned quite a while ago that the tenon means an awful lot on a bowl, on any item. I like to turn between centers. If you watch Lyle Jamison, Cindy Drozda, they turn between centers. Some people would put, now Lyle likes to use a faceplate, and he'll faceplate the end of it and hold it that way. That works fine for him. I prefer to use this, and then I'll put a tenon on it. To make that tenon, however, I use a very expensive patent pending tool, and some people will use a pair of dividers. And they'll stick dividers up here while this lathe's turning, and they'll say don't touch the leading edge on it. Well, I've never got that figured out. I came up with this, and I put this on here, and all I do is put a little mark on it like that. Very safe way to do it. And I like to use 3 or 4 different types of tools when I make that tenon. I don't know if you can see this very well.
Ken. Other Ken.
This is a purchased item from Sorby. No, this is Technitool. I got this in a bunch of tools I got at a garage sale, and I reground it a little bit. And this particular one for putting on tenons seems to work okay. It would simply come up and touch the edge like this, and it's tapered enough that it puts it on automatically on there, the correct angle. Another method, not that this tool is not safe, but I'm going to put my face shield on. Another tool, does it work okay that way? Yeah. Is to take a skew and come up and just put a little edge on it. But I want a little bit of a taper on there. I can put the taper on with this. I can put the taper on with a little spindle gouge. So what I'm trying to emphasize is that this is the start of a good way to hold that tool, or excuse me, to hold the wood. I have end grain here. The grain is going in this direction. If I was to put it on this end here, I would still be scrunching that wood together. To use an expansion could also work, correct? Expansions, however, can split your wood. I like to use a tenon. Personal choice, and whenever I can, I'll use this. So, an idea of what I'm headed into, I'll hand these out. The hollowing system that I use, and then down at the bottom is a place to get a tool, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Pass this around. I'll need it back in a little bit because this is the last part that we're turning, but you'll see the tenon that I cut on here, and I've tapered. I've done the inside here. It's a little thinner than I would normally go. I was trying to get it a little smoother, and you know how that is, one more time and so forth. And you'll notice the bottom is not complete yet. I'm going to try to show you a technique on how to finish that bottom out of there so that you don't go through and wind up making a donut out of it. But this is what I'm working with today. That's a piece of mesquite that's about 5 years dry. You've got to turn the mesquite dry. To do it by hand can be tricky sometimes. Yeah.
Why do we extend it?
Pardon me. I have that on there. Mine sticks out. I got a Powermatic, and I like to get over here and use that inside a lot. It gives me a little bit more space. It can be bouncy if you get too far out here. What I'm setting up to do here is, and I'm just starting, and I'm not going to bore this whole thing. By the way, do you like this shape? Isn't this beautiful? The purpose of this piece of wood, this is a piece of aspen, is to simply show you how I put a tenon on it and then start the hole to start out here and so forth. There's several ways you can drill your depth hole in here. You can use just a twist bit. You can use a spade bit. However, I'll pass this around. Those of you that are Tuesday breakfast will notice that rather than a hollow vessel, this is a large salt shaker now, because I use this, and there's a little nice hole in the bottom. So, but if you feel inside, the inside's, you know, I got the inside fairly consistent all around, but experienced me forgot that darn hole going through there.
Put turquoise in it.
Pardon me?
Put turquoise in it.
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
Put a fancy plug.
And I'm also patenting this tape for measuring distance. So you guys can't use it unless you pay me a royalty. Has everybody seen this done? Anybody want to see it again? All right. One thing that I want to be careful if you're using an extender out here, that you clean the hole. And we crank this up to about 3,200 RPM. Am I correct there? Is this exciting? You want me to keep going? Y'all know how to do this? Okay. I did this little step here for the tenon, and also show you that I try to get an access hole for my system, the system. One of the problems with the system that I have here is that is that okay? I'll pass it around, but I use a metal cutting material from Harbor Freight. They're just high-speed steel bits. And at the very bottom of the drawing that I've sent around, it shows you that they cost, I think it's, was it $5.99? Four, I mean, really expensive. However, I found that Harbor Freight here in town, they don't sell these all the time. They're hard to find. So you have to go online to get them. That's one place to get them. I also have a machinist friend that gave me some. They're just quarter by quarter. These here come with a round one also, but they're pretty inexpensive. But what we're doing is taking these, and this here I got from Yavapai Steel. I had 3-foot chunk of rod, cost, I don't know, $15, something like that. You can buy 1/2 inch, 3/8, 1 inch, 3/4, inexpensive. And I'll grind the end just a little bit, put a center punch on it, take my hand drill a hole in there, stick the, if it's a square cutter, I have to put it on the grinder and grind a little bit of a round end on it. Am I doing okay, Jerry?
Yeah, you're fine.
And however, there are a couple in this box that you get from Harbor Freight. They have a round one in there. It makes it easier. You don't have to sit there and grind it round. But set it in there with a drop of CA glue. If you don't like it, you heat the whole thing up and pull it back out again and do it. I grind them simply by hand on the grinder and do the best I can, rotating it around. I'll pass a couple of these around. But the size of hole that you drill is going to be determined on the tool that you put in there. Now, the system, when I set it up, you're going to see there are some limitations to where you can put it and so forth. It does drive a little bit, sometimes your design, but that hole has to be able to, the tool has to be able to get inside the hole, whether it's a bowl gouge or whatever else. So I've got a fairly, I think this is an 1.8" good size access hole. I would drill this down probably 3/4 of the way and then stop because I'm getting kind of long here. And I wouldn't drill the last bit until I get some of this hollowed out. Why would that be? Stability. I'm trying to keep some mass down here on this piece here, which I'm going to get to at the end. I've still got some mass out in here, but I've got a little bit of a shape of what I want the outside to look like. If you watch Lyle, he won't turn on until about halfway down, and he does his outside about halfway, then he'll do the inside because he's got mass and it doesn't vibrate. Depending on the wood. Now the mesquite piece that's going around, that's starting to vibrate quite a bit. And I took a little bit too much on the back. So rather than keep my speed up high, I dropped my speed of my lathe down and just took my time a little bit more. And I'll show you that as we get into it. John had mentioned that I bend those. Yes, I just heated them up with a torch and bend it a little bit. I'm struggling with that one there and getting around corners. It's okay, but I can't go real deep with it. It's part of it's because it's 1/2 inch. Need a little bit more meat in there. And secondly, I haven't figured out, and if I could see that, John, like using it by hand, if you have a bent, you don't want the tool rest sitting back here. That torque on there, it'll still bounce it a lot. So you're hanging out here a little bit. And while it's you can get around a tighter interior curve with a bent like this on the Jamison system. What you'll see here in a little bit, when I start, I have to get the tool way over here to get it in the hole, and then I've got to bring it back around. And sometimes the system limits what I can do with that, okay? Why do I use round rod? Because that's all the tools are made out of. I don't know. I never had that. That's what I saw. As you make the system up, you have to figure, I want a piece of 3/4, I want a 1/2 inch, I want a 5/8. And so, oops, I'm sorry. Okay. And how do you attach them to the system? So at the material place, I use Prescott Steel. They sell a product called dome rod. Anybody hear of it? DOM? This one shows up better. I have a guy that lives up at Bunds Park that made this one for me. And what it is a piece of dome rod, DOM rod. And DOM rod is simply tubing that has a real thick wall on it. And you can get different thicknesses of wall for whatever you want, almost. I have this made out of 3/4 solid stock, as the drawing shows. Well, to go from 3/4, I've got to be able to attach my different cutters to it. I have a piece of 3/4 in here. This is a piece of dome rod that I welded onto my vertical piece here. I welded a couple of nuts up on top. You could thread that, but the nuts gave me a little bit more thread thickness than what the thickness of the rod was, the dome rod itself, as opposed to, does that one show up here?
Sure. We got it.
Okay. This one, the dome rod is pretty thick walled. And Dave, who made this one for me, was able just to thread it with a 1022 or 1020. And then he milled this down to slide into my receiver here. Am I making sense? When we get onto the captured system, you could use square there, but I'll show you why I went with what I did there. I'll explain why I did it anyway. It's gonna take me a minute to set up here.
Dean, to further answer that question, by it being round, you can adjust the negative rate for your scraper. So it's not totally flat and catchable. You want that negative rate. And by it being round, you can adjust that anywhere from flat to whatever suits you.
Did I pass around the scraper one, the round one? But what he's talking about, yes, John, you're right. You can adjust your cutter down a little bit by twisting and so forth. And on this particular one, I flattened the top here because I wanted it to stay at that point. I probably shouldn't have, to be honest with you.
Dean, I have a question.
Go for it.
So is the tool inserted into a handle?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Okay.
Yeah. The system is not fast to set up. I'll give you that. It takes a little bit of practice. This is a captured system that I made. In hindsight, if I was to do it again, I would make the top rail and bottom rail a little thicker. I think this is like a 1/4 inch. I feel a little bit thicker there. The reason being, I didn't do that, and I found that this bottom rail was vibrating on me a little bit. And I'll show you when we get in there. So in order to eliminate that vibration, I tack welded on a piece of angle iron, and that stiffened it up and solved that problem. If you decide to do one of these, and I think Bill, are you out there?
He's online.
Bill made one too, and I think Dave made one. Dave made his little square. Rubbing here, a little bit of paraffin wax, just as if you put it on your tool rest, a little paraffin helps it slide a little bit better.
And I'll just add, as Dean said, that the setup takes a little while to get it done. With the store-bought ones, it does as well. It's just they're complicated to set up, but boy, they sure are nice once they're in place.
This is why I couldn't find the. But on this one, I did cut a little bit of a relief on here. If we'll pass this around. I find this to be real good when I can see and then get in the bottom to smooth things out. Unfortunately, to buy those cutters, now see, this doesn't work too well. So that's why you have a couple different adapters. Lyle will mention to you when you watch him do his that it's important, as it is with many of our tools that we use, that the cutter should be at dead center. And find dead center of a bowl, a lot of us that mark 1 and 1. I don't recommend doing this on a regular basis. Taking a piece out and putting it back in. Okay, this cutter right here should be dead center. Well, how do you find dead center on here? So we look on here and we put a mark on the bowl. It's sharp. I made up, any of you watch that ventriloquist that has jalapeno on a stick?
Yes, down.
Okay, well, this is a magnet on a stick, and I'm patent pending it. And I have this cut so that it's exactly the same height. I don't know if you can see this, Terry, with the camera.
We'll get to find out.
But I found this to be real handy. And I simply set it like that, adjust, and now I know that this cutter is dead center. Up on top of here, I have a couple of lines on there. One is at a 1/4 inch, one's at a 1/2 inch, and I got one over here that's an 1/8 of an inch right here. I found that trying to get it set to the right height and to keep my laser, and this is what I really like about this system. And some folks have, by no means am I an inventor of any of this. These have been around for a long time. I'll put, can you see that? Showing up. Yeah, there it is. Can you zoom in a little bit more on the overhead?
I can try.
If it'll be clear enough. That's good enough.
Good, that's all there is.
I simply set it there, then I'll turn on my laser. And Lyle's lasers are $30. These you can get 2 for $16 over at Ace Hardware. It's a little bit bigger. I used aluminum here. Some of the system that I have here, I'm sure engineers and a lot of you could do a whole lot better. This works for me. And I've gotten used to using it and I pretty much like it. But what's critical is that this laser that is on here, you see it on the end of the bowl yet? Yeah. There it is up there on top. What's critical is that laser is adjusted so that it's either a 1/4 inch away from this side or this side, but it's very critical as to what part of the vessel you're cutting, as to what part of the tool the laser is away from. Does that make sense? If I put this on the tip, I don't know if you can see, I got to hold it still. If I put this a 1/4 inch away and I start cutting on the side, I'm going to cut through. Follow me? Because my laser is not in the right spot. The laser positioning is very critical. Don't ask me why I know that. Okay. So that's why I have this little item set up here, and I'll move and I need to slide this out just a little bit. Now my cutter, which I'm going to be cutting on the very tip here, is 1/4 of an inch away from the laser. You all got me that far. I no longer have to look. If you'll see here, woo-wee, that is getting pretty darn thin there, Dean. I don't have, are you able to pick up the laser? You can't see the laser, can you?
No, the laser's in the way of the laser.
I'm going to move this back just a little bit, okay? If it's out there over the bed lathe, then you've probably gone too far. Okay, I'm going to double check that I haven't moved that I'm still a quarter of an inch. Okay. I don't have to guess where my tool's at now. I know where my tool is at in here. That's I guess for me, the biggest advantage of using a captured system. Additionally, I'm at about 1,000 RPM.
Okay, I can come into this and start cutting, and I'm going straight in. I have an 1.5 inch hole clear down to the bottom, but it's not the one that has the spur bit, so it won't go right there. But I can walk through. Okay, I'm off the edge there, it's barely showing. Matter of fact, it's showing on the middle bed blade there. I'm barely there. Over here, I can see it's just barely touching it, right? And what I like about this is if I'm anchoring my elbow, I'm here. And when I really want to get fancy, and if it's close enough, I put my belly against it too. That's an advantage of having a bigger belly. But you're able to balance it and hold it nice and steady. And just watch it, and with the feel,
it's just right at about a quarter. Up here on this front up here, I'm closer to an 1/8. Okay, and part of that's because as I went in, I thought I'd just use this as a sample and just to mess with, but as I got going and I ran out of time to get ready, I utilized this piece. This top here is pretty darn thin, and I'll pass this around again so you can all see. When I get out here so far, this is a 5/8 rod. I'm going to switch this over. I have to use my magnet on the stick and readjust my height again. And this one's really important because I'm going clear down to the bottom now. And then I have to readjust my laser again. So is it the fastest thing to do rather than grabbing just a hand tool? There is a reason for it. It can be quicker to do by hand, but now I'm going out on the end. You know, can't quite see that, can you? It's right in here. Now I have this laser 1/4 of an inch away from the end. Now my cutter is here and I'm 1/4 of an inch out from that cutter with here, and you'll see it right in here. Now, what's it? Can you see it down here? So what's that telling you?
Pretty close.
I'm right there, but that's the bottom of my hole. There's where I'm actually working. Okay, so that's how far down. Now, I'm getting pretty close to shorten myself up again. I'm not going to have a lot down here. I'm not going to be able to mess with this bottom an awful lot. This particular spot right here is what I was hoping to be the bottom. So this bottom is going to be, when I figured my foot on there, about 3/8 of an inch is all it's going to be. But now I'm hanging out a little bit farther with the 3/4 inch rod. I'm up to about 1,400 now. I established my bottom. Now I have to keep in mind that I'm on the end of my tool. All right, if I bring this all the way over, thinking I'll wind up cutting on the side, so I want to be careful in there. Susan Murphy, will you come up here, please?
Debatable. Yes.
Okay, will you do this for me? It's gonna fall all the way
I'm like
down
the
on
one
your
that
neck because I got a fat head.
Yeah,
All right, you're gonna hold it overhand here and rest part of your arm here, but don't get it on this other side. Good idea there. Overhand here, just spin the dial. That one, yep, up to about 800, let's try. That's good, 900, good. We'll hold there, and then one hand over here, follow the red, going on down.
I don't have the belt.
All right.
I won't say anymore. Okay, you're gonna go down, straight down, or you just start touching wood. Okay, now pull it to you a little bit. Now, instead of moving this hand, move that hand out a little bit, so it's gonna change your angle. Got that? Pull it out a little bit. There we go. Okay, stop. Okay, now what she's doing, her rubbing is she's rubbing on this side of the lip of the bowl. So in order to compensate for that, she's got to push this over there, and now she can cut again. Have you ever used this before? Nope. Okay. The key to this is I feel it's a safe way to turn, particularly when you get down in hollow stuff. You can establish a pretty consistent outside diameter, thickness, wall thickness. It does take a while to set up. Mine is not the prettiest setup and so forth. I used what I had in the shop. And the green is from Habitat from Humanity, a spray can I got from them. I have about probably $50 worth of material into it.
Yeah.
I found that, and if you've not made any of these, Gary was, what do you call them? Arizona toothpicks. Okay, these are a great tool, and there we are. And it's not a very expensive way to make one, to get in and do some hollowing and so forth. And John, you mentioned the tool. What's it? The
Tool exchange.
Tool Exchange over in Prescott Valley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and good place to get cutters and so forth. That's the system that I use to hollowing out. It takes a little bit, but I also, as I'm using it, and I will try to put my steps just like anything else. So if I have to set up the system, I'll try to set it up to where I'm doing 2 or 3 vessels at a time on the inside, and get them all prepped, kind of what I want, set them aside, and then come back in and start out. As you notice, this, if you've ever, and I'm sure most of you have, turned some mesquite, this is real dry. If I get out here on the edge, I can't do anything else back there, just too much vibration. And I don't even want to put the negative break one on there that I have in there, because I have a piece of mesquite that's sticking in my ceiling that tells me don't do that again. Okay? It's not as big as the one that's over there.